we have apologies from the chair this evening. So please could we start with the first item on the agenda, which is the appointment for the vice chairman for the civic year 22-23. Do we have any nominations? Who are you nominating? Councillor Ward-Booth. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Crofton? Yes. Are there any other nominations? No. So all those in favour? So that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Pope. I'm not aware of any other apologies. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 5th of April 2022. Could I have members' agreement to approve the minutes as a correct record of that meeting? Proposed by Councillor Alder, seconded by Councillor Fernando. Agreed? That's fine. Agreed. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. Just one quick announcement, which is about the new microphones that we have. If you speak into the microphone when you're speaking, so that the system picks it up. And you can also leave these microphones on. You don't need to keep turning them off and on like the old ones. Item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. In which case, item 6, training the role of internal audit. Simon.
Thank you. Just wait for Stephen to do his, there we go. Thank you, Stephen. Just by way of introduction, I think you probably all know me, familiar faces. I'm Simon Martin, the Client Audit Manager for East Herts. As you probably realise, East Herts works in partnership with a number of other councils across Hertfordshire. We have a shared internal audit service. East Herts was one of the founding members approximately 11 years ago. But the other members are Stevenage, Three Rivers, Watford, Welwyn Hatfield, North Herts, Hertsmere, Hertfordshire County Council, and we have a number of external clients, which are predominantly town and parish councils who are fee paying. Keep your budget down, Stephen. As for what I do, my responsibilities are for pulling together the annual internal audit plan for the council, and then in conjunction with my team, delivering that throughout the year. And also author a number of key documents, such as the Audit Charter, which essentially sets out our terms of reference. So next slide, please, Stephen. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. It's essentially what internal audit is, why you have internal audit, and a little bit about how it's delivered. I'm happy to take any questions if you want to interject as we go along. Equally, feel free to leave them to the end, entirely up to you. If there's anything I'm not clear about or you want me to elaborate on, that's probably a good time to do it. That's the definition of internal audit, a rather wordy paragraph produced by the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors. It's not unique to local authorities, nor indeed the public sector, nor indeed the United Kingdom. It's actually a global definition used by the Institute, which by its very nature is a global organisation. There's quite a significant internal audit present throughout Europe, Asia, and in particular the United States, where most of the new theories and practices emerge from. So internal audit is essentially an assurance activity. I've highlighted the key words amongst that paragraph just to bring out the key bits. It's an assurance activity which is tasked with evaluating risk management, internal control, and governance processes within the council. In some respects, it's actually easier to say what internal audit isn't rather than what it is. It used to be said that internal audit watched the battle from afar, then came along and bayoneted the wounded, being wise after the event, I think is what that's getting at. Not anymore, the theory goes. The emphasis should be on preventing people getting wounded in the first place, or preferably even getting into the battle, if we're going to stick with that metaphor. The emphasis is very much, or the emphasis of our work is now very much on prevention rather than cure, finding fault. It used to also be said that internal auditors were the organisation's bloodhound, sniffing out error and fraud. Well, that's also not the case anymore. We're arguably more of a watchdog. We have more in common with the council's risk management function than we do in terms of fraud and error, should we say. The council does have access to fraud services. It's a member of the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. So that's a completely different team. Thank you, Stephen. So in addition to what I've just said, there's a common misconception that internal auditors are accountants. We're not accountants, although many of us are professionally trained in that line of work, and a number of our team continue to do so. But the emphasis is very much upon an inward-looking service focusing on what the organisation is doing. And that's quite distinct from the council's external auditors, who have a responsibility in terms of providing an opinion, amongst other things, on the council's financial statements and records. Some people often get the two confused, but there's quite a clear distinction between the two. So why do you have internal audit? As well as the value it provides the council through the assurance work that it does, it's actually a statutory requirement which is set out in the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. Before that, there was legislation that went back as far as the early 1970s. And there are also links to the council's chief financial officer. Stephen, for his sins, has responsibility for ensuring that there is an adequate and effective internal audit service. So that responsibility rests on his shoulders. But in reality, we work closely together. He has that responsibility, but the shared internal audit service through me is responsible for the delivery of the function. So if SIAS is the delivery vehicle, is probably the best way of thinking about it. So who audits the auditors? Who makes sure that we do a good job? Well, there's something called the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. You may have heard me mention those in the past, but they are essentially a set of principles against which internal audit services throughout local government and the public sector are assessed. There's an annual self-assessment, which we carry out by definition by ourselves, and we report that to the council's management and to the Audit and Governance Committee. Let you know what the outcome of that is. But perhaps more importantly, there's an external assessment carried out by an outside body once every 5 years, and that's far more rigorous, as you might imagine. Our last external assessment was actually last summer in 2021. It covers things like internal audit status within the organisation, making sure it's sufficiently independent and things like that. That we are professionally proficient, that we are conducting our work in accordance with the prescribed standards. And where we don't do that, they will point that out. And they also look at our resourcing to make sure that we have sufficient capacity to deliver on the service that we've been tasked with delivering for the council. And they also look at a set of underpinning policies and procedures, just to make sure that we are appropriately organised, adopt best practice wherever it's appropriate. And they don't just look to see that the policies and procedures are there, they will look to actually make sure that we abide by those as well. So it's quite a robust process. So just popping back to what the role of internal audit is, that's where it sits in terms of the council's assurance framework, providing an independent opinion on governance, risk and control. I keep repeating that because that's the core of what it is that we do. It's very much about delivering assurance to the council's management and members of the Audit and Governance Committee. Why do you as members need that assurance, you may well ask? Well, that list there essentially answers that question. By us issuing you as members with an audit report, the assurance that you obtain for that is avoiding any nasty surprises, should there be any, knowing that activities are being planned and delivered in the way that's intended. Now, you will, as a matter of routine, get all of that from your managers, but the idea of internal audit is it's providing you with independent feedback on that. It's a form of independent confirmation, if you like. And ultimately, it's those bottom two that all of the others feed into. It's about demonstrating to taxpayers that the council is accountable for the way in which it deals with its assets, financial and otherwise, and that we do what we say in terms of complying with our own policies and procedures, that particularly those that members have approved. And of course, the legislation which all councils are obliged to comply with. So that's what we do and why we do it. The who, as I've said, internal audit at East Herts is delivered through a partnership arrangement, but there are other ways that it is done. The council, should it wish to do so, could have an in-house team exclusively focusing on East Herts. Just by way of experience, I know that were that to be the case, the council would probably have one or at most two members of staff. That's fine, but that potentially creates issues around resilience if you've got unplanned absence. Also potential issues around the level of skills, knowledge and expertise one or two people can have. When you've got a shared service, you're getting that interaction across a range of organisations. And at any one point in time, we have approximately 15 staff within our team, all with a common set of skills, knowledge and experience, but we have specialists as well. So you're getting access to that. Yeah, the other model that some organisations adopt is to actually outsource their internal audit activity, and that's fine if that's your policy to do so. But I think that the counter argument for it is internal audit, by definition, is an internal service. if you've got an external body doing it, why would you want an external internal audit service, if that makes sense? So I think that's historically why the councils in Hertfordshire got together to, in effect, have the best of both worlds under a partnership arrangement. We do operate in a semi-commercial way, as some of the accountancy companies do with their internal audit arms. But we also all come from public sector internal audit backgrounds. We have knowledge of how local authorities work, and we try to recruit from within local authorities wherever possible, unless someone is bringing a particular set of skills that we're keen to attract. For example, we've recently recruited a lawyer who decided they wanted to be an internal auditor for some reason. So that's a different set of skills that's come into the service. So there are your three potential delivery models, and as you realise, we've got the shared service. So how do we deliver the service for you? Well, we produce an annual work programme, as I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. That's pulled together in conjunction with the senior leadership team and some of the other managers. We will determine what the audit need is, those areas that we're going to audit in any particular municipal year. The leadership team will then approve that work programme. It's then brought to the Audit and Governance Committee, as you may recall, where you get the opportunity to comment on it and ultimately approve it as well. It's then down to SIAS to deliver that work programme during the year. We try to spread out the 20 or so audit projects that we deliver across the year. We don't always get a smooth curve. Sometimes we get asked to defer pieces of work to later in the year, but broadly speaking, we have a reasonably smooth way in which we try to deliver our work. The programme of work itself, we try and focus on those areas of greatest audit need. That's where the links with risk management come. We will take account of things like the strategic risk register, look at the things that are most important to the council at the current time, and that's where we'll endeavour to focus our audit resource, so we can provide a level of assurance around those things that are most important to you. As that work is progressed, we report how that's going with progress reports to the committee once a quarter, and that ultimately culminates at year end in an annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report, which by happy coincidence is also on the agenda tonight. That annual opinion is formed, it's not a numbers game, but it's an aggregation of all the individual opinions we would have given on each individual piece of work. And as a rough rule of thumb, you can then aggregate that together to give an overall opinion. And that's what you'll see later. So if there is anything you want me to elaborate on, please ask. Other than that, if you've got any specific questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions, members? Councillor?
My contract of employment is actually with Hertfordshire County Council. The County Council acts as, I suppose you describe it as the administrative lead for the partnership. So all of the employees are employees of Hertfordshire County Council, but then they work for all of the different partners. We operate a matrix management arrangement whereby individual auditors get exposed to the majority, if not all, of the SIAS partners during the course of a year or two.
So, supplementary to that, the staff that are carrying out this function here, are they also employed by the County Council, or are they employed by East Herts?
They are also employed by the County Council.
So you've just said about not having an external audit, and you've just talked about yourselves, who are actually external, in many respects. So what's the difference?
Yeah, fair point. When you have a shared service within local government, convention is that one of the partners has to act as the administrative lead, simply for reasons of employment and also for legal reasons as well. So yes, we are all employees of the county council, but many of the team don't actually carry out work for the county council. They will focus on district and borough work.
I will have some other questions when we come to the report that we're going to receive this evening. That I'll wait for that item to come up on the agenda. If I can get into my
Councillor Croft.
Yes, just purely for information. Do you all have, across this group that you work with, do we all have the same standards and the same processes? Or are we all thought of individually with our own directions that we want to go in?
I suppose the unhelpful answer is yes and no. East Herts has its own audit work program. East Herts determined that with me. None of the other partners have any influence on that, unless it's a shared service such as refuse, in which we do the audit with East Herts and North Herts.
So if you find other councils have a better system or better way of doing things, do you recommend it to, and to whom? Who do you report to here if you can see a service that could be improved by going in another direction?
Where we see something operating well elsewhere, we will share that through a learning newsletter that we produce each year. If you've got a particular audit being carried out in, say, Welling Hatfield, but it also features in the East Herts programme, the auditors will look at what other pieces of work have been carried out across the partnership, and where appropriate, incorporate that into their work for East Herts, and vice versa. So if we identify something very good at East Herts, we will often apply that elsewhere as well.
So, who do you actually report to if you find an issue that's not working well and there's a failing in some particular service? Who do you report to in our organisation?
On two levels, it'll be the relevant head of service. They are typically the audit sponsor. We have liaison meetings with Stephen roughly every 4 months. He also gets copies of the audit reports, so he will be made aware of any matters arising in our work. And of course, members are also copied the final reports, so you'll get to see the outcomes of the audits as well.
Okay. Well, and one final thing, if I may, Chairman. You say at any one time you were working on 20 different things, but surely the ideal opportunity is for you to say, well, we're all up to standard. There's nothing for us to do. We're okay.
No. I'll clarify. We're not working on 20 different things at any one point in time. The council's annual audit work programme will consist of 20 audits, which will spread out during the course of the year.
Okay.
There are many more potential audits that could be covered rather than the 20. We don't cover the same thing every year. Some things might get done once a year. Some things might get done twice in a cycle, or once every 3 years.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any further questions?
Not from me.
In which case, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report for 2021-2022. That's for
Sorry, Chairman. I can't access my computer. Can't access
we have an agenda pack on hand for you. Simon.
Sorry about that, it just won't come up.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report, as I alluded to earlier, summarising the internal audit activity carried out during 2021-22. It also provides the outcome of our self-assessment against the audit standards and sets out the Audit Charter for 2022-23. It's quite a long report, so key messages for you are at paragraph 210. Self-assessment of internal audit against the audit standards this year resulted in a generally conforms determination. That's the highest of the 3 ratings. At paragraph 214, the overall annual internal audit opinions for financial and non-financial systems were both reasonable assurance. At paragraph 4.2, there is some details of the fairly challenging service development activities undertaken within SIAS. And at 5.1 and throughout Appendix D is the Audit Charter, which is essentially providing our terms of reference for this year. Just for your reference, that document is unchanged from last year. Just to draw members' attention to the last of the recommendations on the front page of the report, members are invited to seek confirmation from management that internal audit had sufficient resources during the year and was sufficiently independent. That's a technical point that the committee seek at every stage this year, and the confirmation of that, should it be given, needs to be minuted, please. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Crofton?
How do we know the answer to that question? Do we not need to hear from the management to actually determine whether they were influenced?
Will do. Speak.
Chairman, I'm happy to report that internal audit had sufficient resources during the course of the year and were sufficiently independent.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alder, you said you might have some questions.
Yes. To me, it's the use of the English language. Where you've talked about generally, standards generally, to me that says, well, you could or you couldn't. To me, it should be you have or you haven't. I find this generally acceptable not to be, in my view, acceptable, because something is either correct or it's not.
As an auditor, I suppose I can't disagree with you. The public sector internal audit standards has 3 levels within its assessment. Generally conforms, which is the top one, partially conforms, and doesn't conform. Generally conforms means that the vast majority of the 47 standards are complied with. There may be 1 or 2 exceptions. Some organisations may comply with all 47, but yes, I do agree with you. It does provide a little bit of wriggle room, but that's what the standards specify, I'm afraid.
Any other questions?
Yes, on the 214, you've mentioned about non-compliance and scope for improvement. Have you identified the staff who need to have further training? It's under assurance opinion, financial systems, and also under non-financial systems. Have you organised additional training for those staff who might benefit from that?
That's probably a matter for management. We will comment on the control framework and make appropriate recommendations. We do recommend that training is provided in some of our audit reports, and the management response invariably will agree to that. And part of the management response will include identifying who needs the training and who will provide it. So as a broad answer, the answer is yes.
So the staff that need to be trained, are they East Hart staff or are they your staff?
No, that'd be East Herts staff.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? In which case, members go to the recommendations that are on page 25 of the agenda pack. We're recommended to note the annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report, note the results of the self-assessment required by the public sector internal audit standards and the quality assurance and improvement programme, and accept the SIAS Audit Charter. We have already received management assurance that the scope and resources for internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations. From the chair, I'd like to propose that we accept those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crofton, all in favour?
Sorry, Richie.
Carried. Agenda item 8, the strategic risk register. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the last monitoring risk register for the 21-22 financial year. So this was the situation on the Council Strategic Risk Register as at the 31st of March. Of course, since then, things have moved on in the world somewhat. But members will recall that they received the Q3 Strategic Risk Register at the last meeting. So this is now the Q4 position. The Q4 position has not changed that much since Q3. So I don't propose to dwell on and go through this page by page, but if members have questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Members, any questions? Councillor Alder?
Well, going on from the earlier report, are you arranging for staff to have training who have been identified in the SIAS report as perhaps needing further training? Your staff?
Well, it won't necessarily be my staff.
Well, whose staff would they be?
Well, if it was payroll, it would be HR and OD. I mean, I can't. Which particular systems was this, Simon?
Can we find out so that we know who if people need training, they need training?
Councillor, I can assure you, people need training. It's picked up in their PDR process, which is ongoing at the moment, and they are trained. And if people make mistakes, I don't operate a blame culture. I operate a culture of we learn from that mistake. And if training is the issue, then training will be dealt with. If it's about other things where systems need changing, we will change systems. So, do you not know? I'll speak to Simon outside the meeting. So,
I'm sure they can. I'm sure officers can give you a written reply to the specific item that was in the SIAS report. I email Councillor Alder. Are there any other questions? Councillor Crofton.
I wouldn't mind going through pages 58 and what the risk register actually is, because we have all sorts of things in there about equalities and things like that. But I can't see anything in there about the risk to not providing a good, capable service to the public, which is one of the problems we could face if we don't keep up good staff morale and staff management. Can we go through this? Because, Stephen, it seems to me that equalities is not a risk that we need to be worried about. It's whether or not we're doing a good job.
Well, I think when it comes to things like equalities, we have a statutory duty to consider them.
Yes.
Consider the risks associated with them. So
Indeed, but it's not a priority, is it? And
but they will form part of the risk register.
Sure. But I can't see anything in here about the staff training or staff efficiency and retention. Can I be corrected?
Well, the corporate risk register's purpose is to identify those risks that will stop the council actually delivering on its corporate plan and its statutory responsibilities.
Yes.
So the way these are the major risks that will drive the council off course. So, for example, risk number 1, financial resources, which is our highest risk of all. There is a failure in the consequences there, failing to meet statutory duties with potential for legal action, or local government ombudsman finds significant cases of maladministration. If we don't do essential works, for example, the air conditioning systems, there's corporate manslaughter charges which may come if Legionella is exposed from the air conditioning systems. So we do have, these are events which will cause the council's corporate plan. Now, so there's that service level in there. Risk number 2, which is around about corporate governance, external political environment. That then talks about issues relating to local government reorganisation, local government change to local government taxation, which will cause us upheavals. We've got stuff there about leadership and management change, and teams in the leadership team structures, for example. And risk number 4 deals with staffing and staff capability. So we talk about the loss of key staff there and the disruption to council services, poor customer service, internal control of governance failure, reputation damage in the media. We talk about staff capacity there, particularly about to deliver projects. An awful lot of what we do in the council now is project based with members of different service areas coming together as a team to deliver that. We talk about then in risk 4, the unable to recruit to key posts, and all the consequences there is about poor customer service. So we using the corporate risk register in broad thematic areas, because it's the broad thematic area that can knock us off course. So I hope you can see that we have actually got in there about poor customer service and about staff retention and training, etc. But they're encapsulated within the risk, and the biggest risk facing the council is financial.
So we've got it listed there as what I was trying to reach, that I didn't really pick up properly. But where does it feature? I mean, they're just words. How does this feature on the risk register? What priorities are we giving it to consider?
Well, the risk register has scores in it. So, for example, the financial one is an A4, so that's the highest risk. At the end of the register,
where can we see those risks?
The risk I'm looking at page number 63.
Right.
So each risk has a matrix on it. So you will see its reference number, which is 1, A4, which is its score, and the scores are related to the to a matrix, and the matrix is explained on page 57. So we have the highest risk. So the highest risk, the most impacted risks, the ones we're most at danger of being drawn of course for, is an A4 risk. So you will see on that matrix on page 57 that we have what we call the hot zone, which is the red squares, which are A4 and A3 and B4. So any risk in that area, the red, is actively managed by a leadership team on an ongoing basis. The other risks there in the orange zones, the yellow zones, and the green zones are down to heads of service to delegate to manage the risks in those areas. But risk 1, 8, 12, and 3 are in the hot zone, so they are managed actively by a leadership team. So turning then, if I go back now to the actual risk register, so on page 63, it's got its reference number and its score. So the vulnerability, so the vulnerability is the sort of what we are vulnerable to, so financial resources in this case. The trigger is how we will know this is happening. This is the actual event that which will trigger this risk coming into fruition. Then we see the consequences of what happens if that risk materializes. And then in the final column, the mitigation and controls that we have in place to try and deal with the risk and try to mitigate it and control it. And there is a risk owner as well. So you'll find a head of service is the owner of a risk on this table. So we've got financial resources, which obviously money is everything and is the biggest risk to the council. We then have changes in the corporate governance, external political environment. When there was a suggestion that the county council was on an expedition to become the single unitary authority for Hertfordshire, all hell broke loose locally. And it's that sort of disruption that it causes. We've also got planning policy changes when the government was proposing to zone things, etc. Inside the Town and Country Planning Act that we have. Suggestions about imposed local government reorganisation and devaluation. Climate change, zero carbon, build back greener. With how that would impact on our 2030 carbon commitment to be carbon free, and then changes to local taxation. We all know business rates is broken, but we don't know what business rates will be replaced by. And the elephant in the room, of course, is council tax, which, you know, it's based on bands which were what is valued at in 1991. You know, it's not exactly a great system, and property is probably the most undertaxed thing that we have in this country. And, you know, you can make 12% returns on a property and pay, depending on its band, you know, £2,000, £4,000 tax on that, which you can't get that in normal investments, which probably explains why there's an awful lot of Russians buying houses and leaving them empty, because it's still accumulating 12%. But remembering when we changed from general rates to community charge and then on to council tax, the amount of disruption that causes, and the move from community charge to council tax was at a heroic rate. 2 years to reconfigure systems, rebuild everything, and to do that was a heroic amount of work that went on to do that. So just changing the local taxation system, because there are winners and losers, the losers will scream the roof down, and it's just it's massive disruption. And because we don't understand what that potential taxation system will be, we're trying to plan financially in the dark, which goes back again to the first risk. So there's those sort of things that we consider there. We also consider recession, unemployment, and we also consider leadership team changes there. On the staffing, on IT security, we've got data and information loss, data breach. Now, data breaches can be extremely serious. And cyber attacks, I mean, Hackney Council has still not fully recovered from its cyber attack. It's still got a lot of systems it cannot yet still access. And there are a number of other councils that have been subject to cyber attack that have lost their systems completely. We are a council that relies on IT systems. If we lose all of our IT systems and all of our data for months on end, we are going to be in a very serious situation, because we can't collect taxes, we can't pay benefits. And that will have a serious impact on people's lives, which is why the IT security is very, very important. We have the next risk is staff capacity and skills to deliver service. We are finding it extraordinarily difficult to recruit planners. We're finding it extraordinarily difficult to recruit environmental health officers. There's a shortage of lawyers and accountants. And because we stopped training in the 80s and the 90s, we're now in a smaller market. We're in a smaller market now to get people, and we have local authorities here locally cutting each other's throats to poach planners off each other, which is not a great use of taxpayers' money. And obviously, if you can't recruit to key posts, services start to decline, and then you get into a spiral of constant firefighting, which means you're taking your eye off the ball on continuous improvement. You're taking your eye off the ball on efficiency, and that's something we can't afford to do with the financial resources risks. We have poor performance or failure of a key partner or contractor. We missed some bins with the BASA earlier on in the year, and there was an awful lot of public feedback on that. The public were not happy. It causes disruption. I mean, I was my former council, our housing repairs contractor went bankrupt. So we had to find a new contractor to carry out housing repairs. We had to do that within a week. And bearing in mind that you've got people with water running down their walls because their pipes have burst, they've got no heating, etc., etc. So assessing the risk of a contractor failing is an ongoing thing. We're looking at their credit ratings, etc., and we have backup plans if they happen to fail. And it's very important that we do those on those contractors. And but that a contractor, say the waste contractor fails, and there's no suggestion they will, the sheer disruption of nobody collecting refuse and recycling for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's not a pleasant experience, and it will absorb more and more of management time and members' time as well. And that will then put us off course from delivering on the corporate plan. Next risk, a judicial review or major legal challenge. I understand there are some people in Bishop Stortford who have a penchant for judicial reviews. Before my time, the district plan, obviously, we were very lucky. We have a district plan. We have a sound district plan, and the time is rapidly coming to refresh it. If we get that wrong, that district plan's found unsound, then the general principle is that sustainable development will proceed, whether you like it or not. If you haven't got the defense of a local plan, it does open everything up to developers, etc. So that's a risk. We've got obviously climate change is a risk, weather, drought, heat, water pounding out the skies. We've got child or vulnerable adult protection issues in there. There have been a number of high-profile child cases where children have died because there have been failures in the child protection, and that's now leading on to the government making changes, particularly in children's social care. But they are very hot now on child and vulnerable adult protection. We recently had an audit at East Herts, which we passed on our arrangements for child and vulnerable adult protection. But if we fail in our child and adult protection duties, and a child dies, can you imagine the backlash that would be against us, and the amount of reputational damage, which is why this is on the risk register, because it's it has that impact. Again, councils being found not to have dealt with their equalities duties. There have been a number of councils whose entire budgets have been thrown into severe doubt because they haven't performed equalities impact assessments. on their capital programs. And any policy change you make, you should be doing these quality impact assessments, because if they go to, if somebody with protected characteristics goes to court, they can have an entire policy thrown out as being ultra vires, because that quality impact assessment had not been done. Now, if you've got a major policy element in your corporate plan and it fails because the quality has not been done properly, that's a big risk that we don't want to be in that situation. We've got internal control failure. We've got, fortunately, Simon to keep us on the straight and narrow and to make sure we're not getting those internal control failures. But there is a risk of that happening, and if that happens, it's not a pleasant experience to be out there. We've got finally we've got outbreak of disease in humans, which COVID, and then we've got business continuity plan, emergency plan failure. If there is a major incident, all hands to the pumps. But if you're a crucial time on your corporate plan objectives may slip, and the worst one, of course, is the plan failing. And that they are the sort of areas which can have the major big impacts on how the council delivers a corporate plan. And we always say what the vulnerability is, how we know it's happened, the trigger, what the consequences are, and the mitigations and control. And that corporate risk register there covers a huge gamut of the council services, and also helps Simon when he's doing his audit planning to concentrate on the areas of highest risk.
Any further questions, Councillor Crofton?
Well, we've been asked here the recommendations to consider what actions could be taken to manage what further action could be taken to manage the risks. But we don't really know what actions are being taken to manage the risk in the first place. We know what risks are.
They're in the mitigation and control column, Councillor Crofton.
Right.
So if you read down the mitigation and control columns, I'll go back to my favourite one, the finance one.
Yeah.
So you can see there we've got minimum balances held on a risk assessment basis. That formed part of my report to council for budget setting. We've got the modelling of the impact on the grant settlements. We've got 3-year MTFP savings programs, transforming East Herts, and we'll be having a presentation at the September meeting on the transforming East Herts business case and what work we're doing in transforming East Herts to make the council more efficient, deliver a minimum of 1 million of savings. But we've got another 2.6 million to find. And we have, you talk about us not really being able to answer the phones. Our website is so untransactional, it's unbelievable. I can, at another local authority, I can order a bulky waste collection at 11 o'clock at night. In East Herts, I have to wait to phone up. We've got so many people phoning because they can't do transactions online that we can't physically answer all of the calls. And we can't afford to put more people on answering the calls. We need to make the website more transactional end to end, which gets the people who can use the website off the phones, which means the people who need to use the phones can actually get them answered and they can get a service. So this is all part of transforming East Herts. We are examining processes end to end. We're applying Lean Six Sigma and Lean process assessments to it, and we are going to cut out the waste that doesn't need to be there. The aim is for most services to get them on that website online. And if you can't use the website, those who can will, and that will free up, that will decrease the number of people phoning, which means when people do phone because they need assistance, they will get through and get answered, and they will get the same level of service whether they use the website or they pick up the phone to the council.
Thank you, Stephen.
You do speak very well. I know your presentation you did to members a month or two ago was highly impressive.
Thank you, Councillor.
Comment.
Well, the recommendation was that the strategic risk register be reviewed. I think we've reviewed it. Are members happy to note the risk register?
Yes.
Noted. Agenda item 9 is the data protection update. The data protection officer isn't here tonight, but the gist of the report is that a lot of good work has been done in strengthening our data protection processes and procedures. The recommendation is to note the report, and unless members have any questions, I would propose that we note the report. The seconder, Councillor Fernando, all in favour? Noted. Agenda item 10 is the supplementary agenda item, which was circulated after the main agenda was published, and this is the next steps accommodation capital grant audit. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I know Simon did the audit on this, so he'll be able to answer questions if I can't. We received for the first time from some money from Homes England, which we were using for our temporary accommodation flats in the rectory at Stansted Abbots. Part of Homes England's procedure is that when you receive grant money, you then have to return various pieces of information, which you do on their electronic system, and then you certify on that system. Now, I think Simon will correct me if I'm wrong here, but Homes England take a very black and white view of issues. You either did or you didn't, and if you didn't, it's a fail. And then the fails are graded into green, yellow, and red being the most serious fail. So in relation to, I think it was a building control completion certificate was not available, and it was in the post, and that was provided as soon as we had it. But the red one relates to having done the practical completion certificate, but the surveyor did not go till the next day. It was originally all planned for the 31st of March. The 31st of March was the close down day, and it has to be closed down by midday. There was some pressure from Homes England to do it the day before, but they did not pick up that they should have had that surveyor on that particular day. So what Housing and Health have done is they're going to have single name project managers from now on. The head of service will be the project sponsor. It'll all be laid out then what needs to be done when, and it'll be checked, and then it won't be certified on the system until it's been checked that everything, all the information that's required is in line. I think because we've never done this before here at East Hart, it was all a bit people finding their way, and when Homes England asked them to do something, I think they just thought yes, we'll do it on the 30th, because I don't think they joined up that it had to be done. But the procedures that the head of Housing and Health and I've discussed will put that assurance level in place. They do look worse. The reporting of these, I think, makes it look worse than it actually is. It's what I call the hand grenade, pin out the hand grenade school of audit reporting. You know, it's either a fail or it's not, and it doesn't nuance how serious that fail is. You know, I think it was a mistake, and you know, we're all humans. We err occasionally, and I think this is just an error occasionally. But nevertheless, because Homes England take this so seriously, we have put those procedures in place.
Any questions, members?
I think the good thing is
Councillor Wood.
that we'll still be, that at the end of the day, they accept that we can still bid for money. So in a way, it was a happy outcome, although there was a mistake at the beginning.
Thank you. Well, we've been asked to receive and make any comments, and I think the supplementary report and Stephen's explanation gives us reassurance that steps are in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Simon.
Just to by way of background, really, it was rather an unusual piece of work that we were asked to do. You know, normally when you're asked to carry out an audit, you're free to determine the approach that you take and what it is that you cover. In this case, Homes, or one of the grant conditions was that Homes England asked for the local authority's own internal audit service to carry out, in effect, the audit on their behalf. But in doing so, they prescribed what I would crudely describe as an audit checklist, a list of questions, key lines of inquiry. So the auditor worked through the key lines of inquiry, and as Stephen said, they're either yes or no answers. You've got something in place by this date or you haven't. You enter that data into a portal, shoots off to Home England. As auditors, we don't know then what judgment Homes England make until they report to the local authority. So it's a slightly unusual set of circumstances, not just for East Herts, but also for Sires, who were asked to carry out this piece of work.
Thank you. Well, I think we've had plenty of reassurance that measures are in place to prevent a recurrence of this issue. So I would propose that we note the report. Noted. In which case we move on to agenda item 11, which is the work programme for the committee. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. If members will recall that the external auditor thought they might be in the position to give an audit opinion by this meeting. And I think my face gave it away that I didn't think that that would be the case. So again, on the meeting on the 19th of July, I'm assuming, and this may be a mistake on my part to assume, the external auditor will have completed the audit of the 21-22 accounts. No, hang on a minute, which accounts? No, it's the 2021 accounts. The 2021 accounts, I'll get this right, the 2021 accounts, because the 21-22 accounts, they won't start auditing until January 23. So the 2021 accounts, we are hoping the audit opinion is there in July. The another item's come on, which is the review of the assets of community value listing, which if the external auditors are not ready on the 19th of July, I think that item, Chairman, can slip, and these external auditors, if they're not ready, we'll slip them to the September meeting. And I think it's probably wise to cancel the July meeting. Rather than hold it to go through a list of assets of community value, which I think are about 15 assets, and it seems a terrible waste of members' time to come in just for that when it's not crucial. It can slip to the next meeting. So fingers crossed they have done that audit, because it'd be nice to be done with it. But if not, that meeting is probably likely to be cancelled. On the 29th of September, I'm proposing that you have a presentation on transforming East Herts, in which they go through what transforming East Herts is, what its aims are, and then give you the chance to look at the programme overall business case, because that will be a key element of part of our savings programme going forward, and you'll be able to see and ask questions about some of the overall transformational stuff that will go on as part of that programme and its work streams. Then we will have shared anti-fraud service, anti-fraud progress report, the draft annual governance statement I will bring to the September meeting. The annual governance statement is published alongside the statement of accounts and provides a comprehensive review of the council's overall governance arrangements. Provisional outturn to 21-22 will come to the September meeting alongside the financial management Q1 forecast, the annual treasury report for 21-22 before it goes on to full council. Risk management again, and the work programme. Then in November, I'm proposing to ask Nick Jennings to do a presentation on the shared anti-fraud service, and we'll talk about the budget medium-term financial plan. The external auditor may have a planning report by then. We'll do treasury management mid-year review, risk again, and the members' favourite, the annual infrastructure funding statement, when Jackie comes and talks about the excellent work she does on section 106 and the money we've had in to provide infrastructure, etc., around housing. And then in January, it's back to the cycle of budget scrutiny again.
Fantastic. Members, any comments on the work programme, and in particular the possible changes to the July meeting, which I think sounds like a good very idea. Sensible. In which case we'll note the work programme. Agenda item 12, urgent items, though. Do we need a vote on that? I have a proposer to accept those recommendations for the work programme. Councillor Fernandez, seconded by Councillor Alder. All in favour? Carried. And we move to item 12, which is urgent business. There is none, and therefore I call the meeting to a close at 7:58. Thank you, members.